Hey, my name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. Today we're going to code this kind of fun contact card, and the thing we're going to pay attention to is this Contact Me button. When you click it, out can pop these little icons for social media or email or whatever, and they can open links to those. So that's what we're going to work on today. Let's jump right in. Okay, so I've got everything styled except for the button because that's what we want to focus on. And so what we're going to do is style the button first of all with CSS, and then I'll show you how to hook up the JavaScript to make it work how we want it to. Okay, let's go ahead and start, and let me show you a few things on the HTML first. Because we've got that little backdrop shadow here, the easiest way to create that is to actually use the container div to create that background. So you see here we've got this button container that will act as a background on this button itself. Then we're going to do position absolute on all of these links, to Twitter or whatever. And those we will also each have in their own little container, and that container will act as the backdrop. So that's how we're going to style it, and then we'll use just right, left, top, and bottom to kind of offset them so that they work that way even with hover and everything else. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the style itself, and we'll start by just grabbing that button container. And just so you can see what we're doing here, I'll do a background of red, so you can see the kind of the whole section. And you'll see there too, we've got the icons, the social media icons in there as well. So first of all, we will say we want it just to not be full width there. We want it just to be the size of the content. So we'll do display inline block, and you'll see it shrinks it down there. Next, let's go ahead and change the background to what we actually want it to be, which will be a variable here I've got for dark, that kind of dark blue color. Okay, then we're going to come in here and we're going to add a border radius of 50 pixels. This is what we'll eventually add to the button itself, that contact button. Right now it's not going to look right until we get that all situated properly. We do position relative. This will allow us to move it itself kind of where we need to offset it. In addition to that, once we take these icons for social media and stuff and make those absolute, we want them to stay inside this button container. Okay, then we're going to go ahead and put a transition, all of 220 milliseconds, ease in and out. Okay, now we're going to add a class with JavaScript on this called Expanded. So let's go ahead and add that now. Transform, translate x, and we want to do -55%. That means when we hover over it, or when we add that expanded class, it should slide to the left, 55%. Okay, so we've got most of what we need right there. We're going to add one more thing in a moment, but now let's go ahead and style the button itself. We don't have a class on this. It would be wise in production to have some kind of class on this, but for now it's our only button, so we'll just say border none. That removes kind of the default border. Background color, we'll choose the var color blue, and already it's starting to look right. Font family, inherit, and that will pull in the font family from the body itself rather than whatever the default is for the browser. Font size, we'll do 1.5 rem. Font weight, we'll do 900, which is our thick font here. We'll do color, and here we want that yellow color for the actual text, and it's already kind of starting to take shape here. Let's do padding of 0.8 rem and 1.6 rem. Starting to kind of take shape what we want it to do, and we're going to grab this border radius, drop that down there as well, so it's sharing that same border radius. Now, before we do anything else, let's go ahead and grab those icons. They're just in an icon container, and let's just do display none for now so that we can not worry about that. I want to show you something on Chrome. This would actually look like it's totally lined up, but for whatever reason on Safari, you actually need to add width 100% and height 100%. And then it looks just like it does on Chrome, and Chrome still looks great. Okay, we do want to position this as relative. And then we're going to offset this. Now, normally if you did we're going to do left 10 pixels. Without this position relative, that's not going to do anything. Position static is your default. By adding it as relative, you can adjust kind of where it sits in relationship to where it should be normally. So we're going to offset that a little bit, and we'll move it to the right by 10 pixels, and we'll move it up by 10 pixels. Now you might have noticed that that kind of takes it out of the actual proper spacing here. And so we're going to actually use these same values up on the button container itself. Except instead of moving it up and to the right, we're going to move it down and to the left. And now it's positioned right back where it was originally. Okay, I think we're mostly there, but you'll notice if we come over here, we've got no cursor. So let's go ahead and add that cursor pointer. And we already did, let's see, let's add the same transition here. We might just speed it up a little bit. Let's do like 120 milliseconds. Okay, now we've got a couple of the things to add for this button. Mostly, we're talking about the hover state. And so for the hover state, let's go ahead and go left 0, and bottom 0. When we do that, we should be able to come over here and it's starting to act just like we want it to, because we're leaving that kind of that outside container alone, the button container itself. Just the actual button is moving down to meet the container. Okay, now we want to go ahead and add a focus element to this. This would be when somebody tabs over to the button itself. We want to show that you're selecting it, but you haven't yet clicked the button. If we make it to where it shares the same hover capability, might look like you've already clicked it when you haven't done anything yet. So we're going to do a few things here. First of all, we want outline of none, so we don't get that kind of blue box around it. And secondly, we'll do background. Let's see. No, let's just add a filter to it. I was going to change it to perhaps to that dark blue, but I think it would just hide it there. So let's do filter, brightness. And if you do 100%, it'll be the exact same color it is. Or if you do something like 90%, it'll be darker. So let's try that. Now, for whatever reason, it doesn't let me tab to it on this kind of in-app browser. But if we come over here and tab to it, you'll see it makes it slightly darker on ours. And then if you hit spacebar, because it's a button, it'll open that up. So that's what we're going after here. Okay, we got just a couple other things here. Let's go ahead and work on our icon container itself. Remember, we want this to be position absolute, and that should put it right in the middle of this kind of area. Next, we're gonna do background of dark. Same kind of thing. These icon containers are going to share the same setup as we have for the button itself. Border radius, and this time we'll do 50% to keep it a circle. We're going to add that same transition we used earlier, and we're going to set the opacity to 0. Before we do that, I'll go ahead and comment it out so we can still see it, but eventually we'll do that. We also want to do pointer events to none. This allows us to keep it in the flow of the document. So for like screen readers and stuff like that, the button will come first, they expand it, and these next 3 come out. But pointer events means you can't interact with it with your cursor. We'll change that obviously on hover or when we expand it. So let's actually go ahead and do that now. We'll come in here and we'll do expanded. And we're going to take these and reverse them. So on this one, we'll do opacity 1 and pointer events of all. Okay, lastly, we just have the icons themselves. We call this icon. We'll do a background of that blue. And we're going to do display flex. We want to just position those icons directly in the middle. So align items, center, and justify content, center. Okay, and lastly, let's do a padding. That same border radius, we're going to share that. Transition, we'll share that. Once again, we'll bump this down just slightly. We'll do the position relative like we did for actual button as well. And let's go ahead and move it, offset it like we did the other one. We'll do slightly different here. We'll do left 8 pixels and bottom 10 pixels. And then for the actual icon container up here, we'll do something like right 8 pixels and we'll do top of 0. All right, so we've got it offset there. It's positioned right where we want it. You can't interact with it yet. Let's go ahead and take the opacity off it completely. So you can't see it and you can't interact with it. It might as well not even be there. Okay, so I think we've got most everything we need. The last thing is we do want to go ahead and add the same hover and focus effect to them. If we were to remove this and this, I suppose, and come in here and try to hover over them, you'll see nothing happens. So let's go ahead, well, before we take those off, before we put those back on, let's go ahead and add the same items up here. So we'll do icon hover and icon focus. And we need both of these to have the actual class, not just icon. All right, if we come in here, there we go. They snap down just like that. Okay, let's put these back on, and then we're going to go ahead and work on the JavaScript. Now, we've done most of the work because there's not too much work to do in JavaScript. We have gone ahead and linked this social button.js down here. First thing we're going to do is we're going to select that button. You might remember it was called, let's remember, I think it was just called, well, we didn't call it anything, right? We just had it as button. So we don't have a class on it or anything, but we do want to add an event listener to it. So we're going to listen for a click on the button. And when we have a click on the button, we're going to do a couple of things. First of all, we want to actually remove any focus that was on the button. So if they've tabbed over to it and hidden the space bar, we want to remove that right away so the button pops back up after they click it. So once they click it, the first thing we'll do is we'll take the e.target. Now, let's go ahead and console log this. And if we console log the e.target, let me pull up my console here. All right, when we click on this, you'll notice we actually get the button itself. So that's what e.target is. So what we want to do on this e.target is we want to call the blur, we'll need an L there, a blur method to it, which will remove that focus. Okay, the next thing we want to do is actually grab the entire container for all the buttons, which is actually this dark blue, you might remember. So let's come in here and do const, and let's just call it button container. And that is e.target. We want to use that button that we've clicked, it's its parent container. So we'll do parent element to select that in JavaScript. And just to make sure we've got that correct, let's come in here and let's console log that. Come in here, we click this. Now instead of getting the button, we're actually getting the button container that has the button and these 3 little icons in there as well. That's what we want. All right, next we want to add that class to it. You might remember we called it expanded. So let's call class list.add. Actually, let's toggle it so every time we click it, it jumps in and out. Expanded. Okay. So now when we click this, it should slide over. All right, perfect. That's what we want. Okay, so we've called that expanded, added that, toggled that expanded class on. Next, we want to grab the icon containers. Remember, those are the backdrops for each of those little icons. And the way we're going to hook this up in JavaScript, it'd be easy just to add classes to them and then we'd be off to the races. But we want to be able to slide those over dynamically depending on how many of them you've decided to add. So if you add 1, it'll slide over the right amount, 2, the right amount, 3, the right amount, etc. So if we come in here, we want icon container, containers, I guess, because we're selecting several of them. And we want to use the button container and run a query selector on that rather than running it on the entire document because we know it's inside the button container itself. So we'll do a query selector all since we want all of them, and we'll select the icon container. All right, so let's go ahead and check this. If we click, oh, well, I guess we need to actually console log. So let's go ahead and console log this. We click, and yeah, now we're getting all 3 of those icons in the node list. That's what we want. Now we're going to move them over whatever amount we want to. Okay, so we'll grab those icon containers and say for each icon, here's what we want to do. We want to say icon.classList, and we're going to toggle that same class that we added to the kind of the master wrapper. We're going to add it to those icons themselves. So when I click this, they should all show right there. You'll notice that only the top one is really visible, but it's working. And if we click it again, they should disappear. Perfect. So we've toggled that on and off. Now next, we want to say if it contains that expanded class, we want to actually move it over to the right. So let's say if icon.classList contains expanded, and here's what we want to do. We want to say if that's the case, then icon.style right, and we're going to set that, for now, let's set it to something like negative 40, 50 pixels. I don't know, something like that. And then we're going to say if it doesn't contain that, then we want to say icon style.right equals, we'll do like 50%, something like that. That'll move it kind of towards the middle, which is what we're hoping for. We want it to move it towards the middle of this button. So if we click, they move over, click again, they come kind of back towards this area. Now, how can we get all three to move out? We could loop through them and say, like, for the first one, do this, for the second one, do this, for the third one, do this, or like call them out explicitly like that, like position 1 of the node list, position 2 of the node list. But I think the easier way to kind of make it more versatile going forward is to actually add some kind of like translation amount where we want to move it over and then basically duplicate that each time we have a new button. All right, so what we want to do is add a variable up here. We'll just call this translate amount, and we're going to set this to 40. That's a number, not a string, which is important because we're going to do some math on it here in a moment. Then we'll do a let variable so that we can update it. We'll call this current translate amount. And we're going to start everything at 0. Now when we come in here, we're going to say right, and let's go ahead and change these to backticks so we can add that variable in here. We're going to say let, let's see, we're going to pull in the current translate amount. And we need to make sure this is a negative. And if we click this, nothing should happen. It should just sit on this right side. It's technically moved over all the way to the right there, because what we need to do now is come in here and update the variable. So the first time through, it's going to grab whatever the current translate amount is, and it's going to say it's now equal to itself plus the translate amount. So what this does is the first time you loop through here, it says 0 equals to this variable that used to kind of point to 0, now points to 0 plus 40, which means it's now 40. The second time through, this is 40. So 40 equals 40 plus 40, which is 80. Third time through, this is now 80. 80 equals 80 plus 40, 120. So that way it increments it just by whatever this increment amount is each time. And now if we come in here and we click it, they should jump all the way out. Let's see, what did we do wrong? Current translate amount, translate amount. We need to do a percentage sign here. Okay. Come over here, click these, and they all should jump out just like that. Now we can actually shorten this a little bit and just add a plus there, and we're going to plus equal translate amount, which is essentially the same thing as what we just did. So hopefully that was a fun project for you, creating this little button that you can pop out and show different social media icons. Plus, it's Inigo Montoya, so what you going to do? All right, happy coding. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.